everybody making an educational app wants to customize it to each individual kid. And these apps allow you to completely customize stuff to yourself. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but at the same level, the society creates it as a niche to market to, right? You proliferate more identities, just like going to that conference, you found a niche of people that then can be marketed to. And it hasn't facilitated us getting data on groups, communities. In other words, you're spending a lot of time finding out about yourself, but not about the health of the people you deal with. I don't mean just physically, but, and we're doing the same in school. Nobody wants to measure the health of a community of learners in a classroom as a community. We have tons of ways to assess individually, but we can't assess collaboration. And that, I think that has been one of the things that digital media has done for us, and it fits with a lot of larger cultural values, at least in America. This individualism, and with the way modern markets work, which is you can sell the most thing you make. You can't make a lot of profit in a commodity, but the way you can sell something that's not a commodity is make a niche that's going to buy it in a pricing sensitive way because they have that identity.
I think there's a tension, though. I think there are two sides to it. There is that focus on the individual, the sort of N of one. But there are other potentials as well. So there's the crowdsourcing potential. There's the ability, when you have lots of people, we're able to sort of gather data from lots of people, that you can actually solve all sorts of questions. There was a very interesting guy at the conference who was talking about folksonomies of health. And he had developed this app where people could, talk about how they're feeling. And so people with different medical conditions could talk about how they're feeling. So they just, how are you feeling? And they write a sentence or something like that. And then he would take these sentences and try to develop these folksonomies of the way people are talking about things like pain and discomfort and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think you're actually right that that is an important sort of trend, but I think there's a counter trend as well.
But it still gets you to see yourself, just as you do with it, is that you really are just an individual phenotype. But in fact, you're a social phenotype, right? There's epigenetics. Genes are not doing things outside of the environment.
That's
and
right.
it does crystallize an asocial view of ourselves when a good deal of our health and learning has to do with the social links we have to other people.
And on that point, almost a kind of, especially on 23andMe, a kind of scary discourse. It's sort of, when people start talking about themselves in terms of their genetic makeup,
Yes.
right? And saying, I'm DD, this is me. That's like a bit like eugenics. That's a little bit scary. I think James has had her hand up for a while. I think, Jane, haven't you had your hand up for a while?
Just a quick one. Immediately it makes me think about how it's going to affect, the doctor-patient relationship. I mean, how do doctors deal with you? I mean, when you go in for a consultation, as opposed to someone like me who doesn't do that. I mean, the medical profession is going to have to really readjust, because doctors have so much invested in being the knowers of these things, and this big data is going to.
You want to turn on the lights?
Yeah.
Is that what you want to do? I went to my doctor after I got my genetic test. And he sort of sat and looked at all these pages of data I'd given him. And he said to me, in medical school they told us that one day we would have a patient. But I mean, he was very good. He's a very cool doctor. And he said, well, I just, I don't know much about this. And in fact, I don't actually know very much about genetics. And that's true for most doctors. And I'm lucky to have a doctor who will admit that. There's a lot of doctors. Well, a lot of doctors, I mean, what makes them uncomfortable is is not so much that patients are bringing in this data to them, but they actually don't really understand the data. But that's something that they're going to have to start dealing with, because pharmacogenetics is going to be a very, very important, part of medicine in the future.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a question or what, but I had, like, from the first talks in the morning about putting high-tech stuff in the hands of babies and this sophisticated information in the hands of lay people, is there a trend? And what is it? Is it like technology's getting in our face, like it's part of us now, kind of like our toenails and fingernails and hair, and it's become kind of organic to us.
It's the cyborg.
Well,
I don't know. Is it?
Yeah.
I think Dave here, with his intellectual affinity to Andy Clark, would say it always has been.
Yeah.
Technology always has been, intimately related to our bodies and our minds, from the first sort of tools that we started making. But I mean, there are a lot of themes in what you're talking about. One of the themes is the kind of democratization of information, and I think that's definitely a theme that can be unpacked and can be talked about and can be looked at a lot more critically. And 23andMe is a very, very interesting example, because they had a lot of legal problems. When I got my 23andMe test, I actually, my parents live in New York, and so I got the kit in New York. But in New York, it's against the law to take a medical test without the involvement of a doctor. And so it was illegal for me to send my saliva sample from the state of New York. So I had to give it to my sister to drive it down to Baltimore to mail it. So I mean, there are a lot of, the AMA criticizes this stuff, says, when people get access to this kind of information, it can cause all sorts of problems. They start having unnecessary medical tests, all this sort of thing. And the answer that 23andMe always has is this kind of discourse of rights. You have the right to your information. And constructing genetic information as information that kind of naturally exists inside your body, that you have a right to, that you own, and so I think that's an interesting conversation to have, because a lot of times people sort of very kind of easily throw out these terms, the democratization of information and stuff like that. But I mean, I think it is something worth looking at critically.
I think your question or your comment also points to the way this field's very often been marked by that kind of online, offline sort of dimension, that now we seem to be reaching a place where technology is just absorbed into our everyday lives, into the lives of babies, as you say, and into your into the details. In a way, it's quite interesting. I mean, Victoria was talking about the sort of collapse of the online and offline, and I think that particularly your work speaks to that.
I wonder about the critical literacies element of what you were saying, and what you just said sort of touched on that. One thing I wonder is if there are these sorts of practices out there, how would educators prepare students to deal with the kind of choices that they need to make, and sort of foresee the issues around access and that sort of thing? So what sorts of steps would educators take? In particular, not just to be aware of those things, but also to know that they can somehow resist those sorts of things. And then while this discussion was going on, I was getting to wondering about how do you resist? I mean, you don't have to record your heartbeat or anything like that, so we can opt out right from the very beginning. But we've seen with things like Facebook that they get to a critical mass, and you almost feel that you're compelled to participate because of the rewards that you'd otherwise be turning down, I suppose. And so it occurs to me that there's some social discussion that needs to be had at a quite high level, which involves the law, and decisions and policies need to be made about where's the appropriate line to be drawn. So I wondered if you might sort of address some of that.
Okay, I can solve that problem.
Yeah.
It's funny how power changes, isn't it? Because now, or at least maybe 10 years ago, the power was saying, don't do this. The medical establishment was saying, don't do this, that's my job. Don't get a genetic test. Don't, and that's what the laws are still saying. Don't monitor your heart rate. Don't go on the net and find out what's wrong with you because that'll just confuse you. And, I'm the expert. I'll tell you. But I think you're right. In a very short time, it's going to go into the other way, where you will be obligated somehow to, and if you are not tracking your vital signs 24 hours a day, you will be considered irresponsible. People will think of you as an unhealthy person. Oh, you don't have a Fitbit. Why, you're so unhealthy. Not having a Fitbit means not being a smoker or something like that.
And it might affect your access to insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the whole systemic question, right? There is, for example, genetic information. There's a law in the States now called the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, signed by President Bush, which makes it illegal to discriminate against someone based on their genetic information. So my insurance company can't raise my premiums, for example, because I have this premonition to get colorectal cancer. But then if you turn that around and you look at it from the point of view of the insurance companies, you think, well, wait a minute, doesn't that actually give me an unfair advantage? Because I have information about my risk that if we're going to play this gambling game, I actually have an unfair advantage there. So it's a really, really complex thing, and it's not just the thing is it's not just teachers, it's not just education. It's doctors, it's healthcare practitioners, it's social workers, it's a whole range of the helping professions who need to get their head around helping people to develop these critical literacies. And how to do it, I guess that's the theme of the conference. That's what we need to discuss. So I'll let you guys figure that out. I think we have some announcements. Do you have some announcements?
Yes. So for those of you coming to the dinner, the invited speakers will meet downstairs.